Chapter 14. The Tome of Strahd. They headed for the west gate, and Rowan heaved a sigh of relief. The tightly packed houses, the feeling of people watching whenever she went out in the street. Vallaki never gave her space to breathe, and nothing was being done about the prophecy. But all that was about to change. They said goodbye to the Blue Water Inn, and Rowan hoped it would be a long time before she saw it again. Their mounts plodded through the muddy town, accompanied by an old scruffy draft horse pulling a rickety wagon with Elvir and Milivaj at the driver's seat. Milivaj's two younger siblings sat with forlorn faces in the wagon's bed, a broken child's coffin resting between the little boy and girl. "I still don't think it's safe for the children to come," Rowan said, riding as she usually did behind Navara on Juniper. "They'll be fine once we get to Kresik," Henry said. It wasn't Kresik she was worried about. She glanced at Elvir. Unlike the others, Rowan didn't trust the bard. Maybe it was because his songs evoked such strong emotions in her, one normally so reserved. But most troubling was that he was as secretive as herself. She only hoped that escorting Elvir to the Wizard of Wines wouldn't steer them from their true course. "Navara," Rowan said, "can I see the journal again? We need to think about where the items from the prophecy might be." "Let's see," the warlock said, digging through her pack. "Here's a letter from Vasili, a pencil, the scarf Vasili gave me." She took out the scarf and smelled it. "Oh, I miss him already." Rowan huffed. "Don't be impatient. It's in here somewhere." Rowan clenched her teeth. She was not impatient. Far from it. She was the most patient person she knew. How else could she have withstood the torment inflicted on her every sleeping hour, let alone the haunting memories that clung like a leech to her sanity? No, she was very patient. "Oh, look, there's my candle. And Herkimoid's snack. Ew, it's starting to smell." "Get the damn journal, Navara," Rowan spat, then quickly bit her lip. Navara's wounded eyes looked down as she pulled out the black book. "I'm sorry," Rowan said. "I don't know what came over me." To be honest, Rowan had been feeling more agitated ever since she woke up in the grave. "It's all right," Navara said. "I'm sorry I made you upset. But here." She opened the journal. "If you want, I know you said you'd never seen your reflection before, but I can show you your portrait. I'm not the best artist, but I've been told I draw good likenesses of people." Rowan didn't tell her she had already snuck a peek at the drawing. But as Navara held it out, she looked at the picture anew, trying to fix the image of herself in her mind. Rowan saw her mother in the fine lines that composed the sharp face. She almost feared to keep looking at it, worried she would see too much of her father in those lines as well. "Henry's in here too," Navara said, "although I don't think I got his armor right." "What's that?" Henry asked, hearing his name and slowing Snowflake to listen. Navara turned the page and showed everyone her portrait of the knight. "I think that's the most handsome drawing I've ever seen," Irina said. "And here's Irina." Navara flipped another page, displaying a beautiful young woman. "That one is the best by far," Henry said, sharing a smile with Irina over his shoulder. Irina seemed to tighten her grip around the knight's waist. There was something unspoken between those two. It made Rowan feel awkward. "I'm sure you have Vasili in there?" Rowan said to Navara. Navara beamed and turned the page to a well-detailed portrait of the young nobleman. He was attractive, and Rowan could see why Navara was drawn to his blithe but enigmatic features. What about Gostomir? Irina asked. We're all curious to see what he looks like. Navara flipped the pages with glee. I did a better drawing of him back home, but this one's not bad. She held Gostomir's portrait aloft. Wow, Henry said. Morning Lord above, Irina said. I take it back. That is the most handsome portrait I've ever seen. Henry straightened his back and stuck out his jaw in an exaggerated way. He's rather good-looking, I admit. But I mean, can he really rival the face of an Asmoneer? An Azamar, you mean? Irina asked. Whatever. Henry waved his hand. Rowan took the journal to get a closer look. By the heavens, Navara, she said. Vasily is cute, but Gostomir, he is on a whole different level. There's no competition. Competition? Navara gave a nervous chuckle. They reached the west gate to find a guard arguing with a familiar-looking man. Henry and Navara reined in their mounts. What's going on here? Henry asked. Sheriff, the guard said. This devil-worshipper is trying to stir up trouble. I resent that, you ignorant hick, said the man, whom Rowan recognized as one of the first people they had met in Barovia. His pointed nose and pointed beard framed a crooked scowl. I'm only trying to enter the town, as is my right. I remember you, Henry said. You're... Aragal, the man said. Sheriff, said the guard, saluting Henry. I'm only following regulations. Vistani aren't allowed into town, sir. That changed yesterday, Henry said. By decree of the new burgomaster, all peaceful Vistani and Druids are allowed in Vallaki. Admittance at the gates will no longer be dictated by prejudice. But we should remind everyone that the eyes of the law are watching. With these words, Henry narrowed his eyes at Aragal and touched the cut lock on Snowflake's mane. The guard stuttered. But, Sheriff, is that wise? Henry held up his hand, and the guard submitted, stepping aside to let the Vistana pass. Thank you, Aragal said to Henry. Actually, I was on my way to seek your help, the sheriff's help. My niece, Arabelle, went missing yesterday, and I fear she's in danger. We really need to be going, Elvir said to Henry. If the man needs help, he can ask the guards at the burgomaster's mansion. Aragal grimaced. I'm sure they'll listen to me and show me the same kind of respect as this man did. He gestured to the gate guard. He has a point, Navara said. Without a sheriff or a responsible deputy to solve the case, his niece could be lost forever. We should help. Wait, Aragal, is your niece also Vistani? Aragal narrowed his eyes. Of course. Her grandmother is Madame Eva. Navara gasped and patted Rowan's knee. Rowan! Rowan! I'm right here. A missing child holds the key to this treasure's release, the warlock said. The Vistani have what you seek. Rowan's eyes went wide. The prophecy. We'll help you, Aragal, Henry said, then turning on Navara and Rowan. Only because it's the right thing to do. Aye, aye, Sheriff. Navara saluted him. Everyone except Elvir, who stayed behind with Milivaj and the children at the gate, arrived at the house of Blinsky. Apparently, 7-year-old Arabelle had been known to sneak into the toy shop before, and Aragal thought it best to check there first. Sheriff Henry! Blinsky said when they walked in. He sat behind a counter, surrounded by stuffed dolls and hanging marionettes, stitching together a toy wolf. I wanted to thank you for finding my friend Udo. He's alive because of you. And with the help of my deputy, Henry added.
And Vasily, Navara said. We only found him after Vasily moved into the mansion. The poor man must have been chained up in that closet for a 10-day. How's Udo doing now?
He's alive and well. Praise the morning lord.
All this is very touching,
Aragal said, resting his hands on the counter and leaning over the toy maker.
But I need to know if you've seen a little girl recently. Vistani.
Vistani? Little girl? Dark curly hair? Yes, she was here yesterday afternoon. I told her I was happy Vistani can shop here now. Happy to have new customers.
Where did she go from here?
Aragal asked.
I don't know, but she left with a man.
What man?
Aragal's nose was inches from Blinsky's, and the toy maker swallowed.
Bluto.
The drunken fisherman?
Navara asked. Blinsky nodded.
You let some drunk walk out with my little niece?
But please, don't curse me with the evil eye.
Where did they go?
Aragal grabbed Blinsky by the collar.
I don't know.
Navara stood by Aragal.
When I was on guard duty at the North Gate, I saw Bluto coming and going from Lake Zarevich, she said. He's a fisherman, after all.
Then let's go.
Aragal released the toy maker and stormed out. The streets were wet with rain from the night before, and the perennial mist clung to the ground. Rowan almost wished she had stayed with Elvire, just to avoid bumping shoulders with busy townsfolk, but she needed to see this through, and someone needed to keep a close watch on Aragal. She didn't know which of the Vistani were spying on them, but even if Aragal wasn't working directly for Strahd, he was still part of a society that owned people. Her kind of people. Rowan didn't want to think of herself as prejudiced, but how could any slavers be trusted? Do you have a camp nearby? Rowan asked, walking next to the Vistana. Aragal turned up his nose at the elf, but said,
There's one southwest of Vallaki, run by my brother.
Arabelle's father? Rowan guessed.
Yes, his name is Luvash.
Are there other Vistani camps in Barovia?
We move around, but the one near Vallaki is more permanent.
Rowan wanted to prod the Vistana more, but she kept quiet, listened, and watched. Navara and Henry asked him more questions about Arabelle, as the village street narrowed, becoming a dirt path soon after they left the north gate. Dense trees lined the path on either side, and Rowan caught the scent of fresh water among the mingling odors of pine and rotting leaves. When they had walked a short way, the wood opened, and Rowan breathed in deeply. An expansive rocky shore lay before them, and beyond it, a glassy lake stretching out of sight to the left and right.
There's someone on the lake,
Irina said, pointing. Rowan slid from Juniper's back, looking out on the dark, watery expanse. There, less than a mile offshore, was a small boat with a single occupant.
That's him! That's Bluto!
Navara said. The fat man in the boat lifted a large sack, the size of a child, and dumped it into the lake. A few inky ripples emanated from the faint plunk.
Arabelle!
Cried Aragal. Henry jumped down from his horse and ran. Right before his feet hit the water, he leapt into the air. 2 magnificent wings sprouted from his back and carried him across the lake. Rowan did not have time to gawk at the revelation that Henry had wings. She needed to act fast. She dove into the murky water, white fur sprouting from her fingertips down to her arms, torso, and legs. The transformation took seconds, and soon Rowan swam as a polar bear. Her head rose above the water, and she watched Henry dive from the sky, skimming the surface of the lake. He tried to grab the sack before it slipped beneath the surface, but he was too late. It was already sinking beyond his reach.
Henry can't swim with his armor,
Rowan thought. It was up to her. She plunged her head under and tore through the water after the sinking parcel. As tiny bubbles escaped through the top, stretching out her long neck, she grabbed it with her teeth, careful not to bite the contents within. Then up she swam, up toward the light, up toward the boat's dark silhouette. As soon as she broke the surface, Henry lifted the sack and set it on the hull of the rowboat. He ripped the bag open, and a small girl's limp body tumbled out. Rowan grabbed the gunwale of the boat, as her paws became hands, and hoisted herself in.
"What's wrong with you?"
she demanded of the fat man sitting at the stern. She slapped him.
"Are you bewitched?"
Then she turned to see Henry open the girl's mouth and breathe magic into her lungs. The glow from his breath filled her body so that her chest radiated light. The girl's eyes flashed open, and she coughed long and hard, spewing lake water onto Henry's boots.
"It's all right,"
Henry said. "Your uncle is here on the shore." Then he looked up at Bluto. The fisherman's eyes darted back and forth, but he did not try to escape. Rowan slapped him a second time.
"Stop that!" Bluto said.
"Tell us what you were doing."
Rowan raised her hand to strike again.
"She's Vistani," he blurted out.
"Do you hate them that much?"
"It's just... they're lucky, and I need fish. I haven't caught anything in over a 10-day. I'm starving. You can't blame me for trying to appease the lake gods."
Rowan scowled as the man rubbed his fat fingers together. The muscles in Henry's jaw tightened.
"We're taking you back with us,"
Rowan said. Then she used the rope from the sack to tie Bluto's hands and feet.
"You can't do this to me," he said. "I'll tell the burgomaster. He doesn't give a rat's ass about killing Vistani."
"You mean Baron Valakovich?"
Rowan asked.
"Yeah."
The man hiccuped as an empty bottle rolled out from under his seat.
"Someone hasn't been keeping up with politics," she said. "Baron Vasily von Holtz is burgomaster now. Pray that he might be merciful."
At that, Henry interrupted. "No, this son of a bitch doesn't deserve mercy from Vasily. I'm the sheriff, and I say that child killers can reap what they sow. You want to appease the lake gods? So be it." Then he grabbed Bluto and threw him overboard. Rowan covered the little girl's ears and turned her gaze away, as Henry used an oar to hold the fisherman under. When the deed was done, Henry sat down and began rowing back to shore. Rowan patted Arabelle with a soothing hand, the way her mother used to comfort her when she was afraid. She was not sure whether to praise or chastise Henry for his swift act of justice, and said nothing as he rowed. But she was relieved, not only because of what he had done to Bluto, but because she wasn't the only one who had been keeping secrets. There was always something curious about Henry's magic, but she had never guessed he was hiding angelic wings this whole time. Is that what Irina had meant when she called him an Azamar? When they landed on shore, Arabelle stumbled out of the boat and ran to her uncle. Aragal grabbed his niece, holding her at arm's length to inspect her.
"Never run off like that again, you hear?"
Arabelle's lip trembled, and he hugged her. Then he stood and thanked Henry and Rowan.
"Where's the bastard who did this? I'll slit his throat."
Aragal drew a knife from his belt. "He wanted fish, so that's what I gave him," Henry said flatly. Rowan told them the full story, and Irina put a hand to her mouth.
"Why children?"
Navara asked no one in particular.
Barovia is an unkind place, Irina said, but it preys on the innocent most of all.
Navara knelt beside the little girl.
I'm glad you're all right, Arabelle, and I must say you have a lovely name. Thank you, Arabelle said quietly. And Henry!
Navara stood and turned on him, and gave his shoulder a friendly punch.
When were you going to tell us about the wings? I'm going to say it. You are amazing!
Herkomoid rose from Navara's shoulders, puffing out his chest and batting his wings, just as Henry had done before flying off to save the day.
You're a lucky girl, Irina.
Navara nudged her. Irina blushed. Why are you praising me? Henry asked. It was Whiskers who saved Arabelle. Why does everything have to be about me and my wings? Then he stomped off toward the horses. Navara whispered in Rowan's ear.
He'll get mad if I say this out loud, but mark my words. One day Henry Gibson will see that he is the chosen one.
Please, all of you, Aragal said. You must come to the camp. Luvash will want to reward the people who rescued his daughter.
Once they met back with Elvir and the 3 siblings at the west gate, they all headed down the Svalich road. The Vistani camp was only half a mile from Vallaki. Though it was on their way to the Wizard of Wines, Elvir seemed irritated they would be taking another detour. He was worried about his family, and reiterated that time was of the essence. They promised the bard they would be quick, as they followed Aragal on a path off the main road. Milivaj and the children were too afraid to enter the camp, and waited by the tree line near the road. Elvir grudgingly waited with them. A large faded red tent sat atop a steep grassy hill. The many wagons encircling the tent were dwarfed in comparison. Rowan and the others followed the dirt path upward, passing sod-roofed hovels that were built into the base of the hill. Outside one of the hovels, a couple of grey-cloaked men were splitting firewood. Rowan glimpsed pointed ears under their long hair. They were elves. Henry and Navara left Juniper and Snowflake outside with an elf, who bowed low to Aragal. Then Rowan and the others followed the Vistana into the red tent. A tormented cry greeted them as the entry curtain was pulled back. Bound to the tent's center pole was a man, his bare back crisscrossed with crimson lacerations. A few feet away from the bleeding man stood a broad-shouldered Vistana, heaving from exertion, a bloody whip in his right hand.
I hope Alexei has learned his lesson, Luvash, Aragal said to the man with the whip.
Daddy!
Arabelle ran to her father. The man with the whip dropped the lash and scooped Arabelle up in his massive arms.
My little girl,
he said in a loud voice.
Are you all right? Are you hurt?
I'm fine. The nice angel man and the elf bear rescued me.
This is Henry, said Aragal, the new sheriff of Vallaki. He and his friends saved her. Some soulless scoundrel kidnapped her. But not to worry, the sheriff took care of him.
The father, Luvash, walked over to the strangers with Arabelle at his side. He shook Henry's hand, pulling him into a hug. Luvash was shorter than Henry, but his bear-like arms engulfed him like a child.
I'm eternally grateful,
Luvash said, releasing the knight.
Please, share food and wine with us.
He waved to a hooded figure in the corner of the tent.
Casimir, bring us the good stuff. Fetch the last bottle of Champagne de l'Estompe.
Rowan could tell by his narrow facial features that the hooded man was an elf. Master, Casimir said, bowing. Should I free Alexei first? The beaten man slumped down the wooden pole.
Daddy, it wasn't Alexei's fault, Arabelle said. I was the one who ran away.
Luvash looked over at the beaten man.
Alexei failed in his responsibilities. Next time, Uncle Aragal will keep an eye on you.
Arabelle's bottom lip turned down in a frown.
Can Uncle Kaz watch me instead? Please, I promise never to run away on him.
She took the elf's hand.
I'll think on it, Luvash said. Go untie him, Casimir.
Mr. Luvash, Henry said, we would love to stay, but we have many miles to travel before dark, and we need to get going.
Come, you must have at least one drink,
Luvash said. Henry shook his head. We have friends waiting for us on the road. I don't want them to think we've abandoned them. Luvash held up a finger.
At least let me reward you, and I will not take no for an answer. I have a gift. Come.
Luvash left the tent, and the others followed. Before walking out, Rowan glanced over her shoulder. Casimir cut the rope from Alexei's hands and helped the Vistana to his feet. When the elf looked up, his eyes locked on hers, but Rowan quickly looked away. Luvash led them to one of the barrel-topped wagons and told them to wait while he and his brother climbed in.
Daddy will pay you handsomely for saving my life,
Arabelle said. Her blue eyes dazzled bright against her brown skin.
Is it true that Madame Eva is your grandmother?
Rowan asked her.
Sure is. I even have the gift.
The gift? Navara asked with excited curiosity.
Oh yes, when I grow up, I'm going to be the greatest fortune-teller in history. I know because I read it in some tea leaves once. Oh, can you tell me my fortune?
Navara asked.
Hold out your hand.
Navara held out her hand, and the little girl scrutinized her palm. Arabelle's brow furrowed in concentration, then relaxed a moment later.
Someone will betray you. Someone close to you.
Betray me? Navara asked with concern.
Who would do that? Why? Are you sure you're reading me right? Oh yes, it's very clear.
Navara's worried eyes darted to Rowan, then to Henry, then to Irina.
She's only a child, Rowan said, to comfort her friend. She's just saying that to sound grand.
Luvash came out of the wagon holding an onyx jewelry box. It was about the size of 2 hands, with gold filigree running along the edges.
Thank you again,
Luvash said, handing the box to Henry.
And if you ever need anything, come back and we can share that bottle of wine.
Once they were at the bottom of the hill outside the camp, Rowan and Navara could not contain their curiosity any longer and opened the box. It was filled with gold coins. Rowan sighed in disappointment.
What a lavish gift,
Irina said.
It is,
Rowan supposed. But it had nothing to do with the prophecy. The missing child, the Vistani camp, it all seemed to fit. Yet maybe Henry was right. A low voice whispered in the back of her mind.
Rowan, call my name and I will give you something to live for.
A chill shot up her back. She knew she should ignore the memory, but she longed for answers. When they met up with Elvir and the wagon, she looked at her small coffin sitting in the back and thought of Vampire. Neither she nor the others knew if a Dhampir could rise from the dead a second time. But deep inside, she knew that if she called out that evil name, therein lay a promise of immortality. They were on their way again, and had just rounded the first bend in the road, when someone came running up the path behind them. Rowan recognized him right away. It was the elf, Casimir.
Wait,
he said as he approached. They all stopped.
Forgive me, I needed to make sure you were out of sight of the camp.
He came up to Rowan, who stood beside Navara and Juniper.
My master wishes for you to have this, but you must keep it secret.
He handed Rowan a large leather-bound tome with a metal clasp. "What is it?" Rowan asked. "Knowledge of the Ancient," Casimir said. The hairs on the back of Rowan's neck stood on end. "My master Luvash wants to see the valley restored. Perhaps you— I fear to grasp at a hope so faint, but he thinks perhaps you will do what others have not." Rowan took the book, touching the hand that gave it to her. Their eyes met again, and Casimir did not turn away. A low-hanging hood masked his eyes in shadow, but the intensity of his gaze was unmistakable. "Forgive me," he said. "It's been so long since I've seen— What's your name?"
"Rowan Arnuana," she said.
"I'm Casimir Velikov, leader of the Dusk Elves, or what's left of us. Tell me, Rowan, how is it that you are alive?" She looked down at the book, dreading to think how he knew her secret of escaping death in the graveyard. "You must have fled Borovia before he could find you. But how?" Casimir asked.
"What?"
Rowan asked, taken aback.
"I'm sorry, I don't understand. Before who could find me? I only just found out I was born here."
"You are a Dusk Elf." As he said it, she knew it to be true. The grave in Vallaki, the lost memories, even Casimir's accent echoed her own.
"What happened to the Dusk Elf women?"
Rowan asked. Deep sorrow stole across his face for a moment. Then he said with composure, "They were killed, by order of Count Strahd. You are the only one left." Rowan dug her fingernails into the book.
"Why? Why did this happen?"
"We were punished for crimes against the Dark Lord."
"Is that why the rest of you are slaves?"
He nodded, but said, "It's a long story."
"What did you do? What crimes did the elves commit to incur his wrath?"
"I'm sorry, I would like to tell you more, but right now I must go. I was only sent to give you that book. I wish you all good luck, and I hope we can meet again." Rowan was about to tell him she wanted to stay. She needed to hear about her people. But before she opened her mouth, Casimir had disappeared. It must have been by magic, for she blinked her eyes only once, and he was gone.
"What's that book?"
Navara asked, peering down from atop juniper. The others fixed their eyes on the tome in Rowan's hand. A chill breeze blew in from the east as Rowan opened the clasp and turned to the first page. The worn parchment was brittle and stained. The writing that marked it was faded but legible. Beyond the first pages, however, the text was written in some kind of archaic shorthand.
"What does it say?" Henry asked, moving Snowflake closer.
Rowan's eyes went wide as she began to read.
"I am the ancient. I am the land. I was once a warrior, righteous, noble, and true. My father, king of an august throne, marshaled a great army to subdue the valley of Argynvale. At my father's side, I fought to free the people from a tyrannical silver dragon. The war raged for 10 long years until one day the king fell in battle. I took up my father's sword and thundered across the land like the scourge of an avenging god. I won the victory, but war beat down my soul as wind wears stone into dust. Goodness faded from my life. I found that my youth had been stolen by the unrelenting exigencies of political necessity. Once I conquered Argynvale and slew the cursed dragon, I renamed the valley Borovia after my late father. I called for my mother and brought her to live in Castle Ravenloft. She came with my brother Sergei. 15 years younger than myself, Sergei was handsome and vivacious, and I hated him for both. As my people settled in the valley,
one maiden stood out among the rest. Hers was a face that would make a goddess boil with envy, a body so lithe and shapely it could melt away the mountains with desire. She was an all-conquering Medusa, the sight of which consumed her every beholder, not with stone, but with unquenchable fire. Her name was Tatiana, and I longed for her. Though I loved her with all my heart, she spurned me. Elder and brother were my names to her. She saw nothing in me but faded vigour, an old man to be pitied. And so her heart went to Sergei, and the two were betrothed. The wedding was planned and the date was set, but I was alone. Death was the only companion that awaited me, but I would not bend to its will. As I watched my brother take the only thing I ever loved, my heart seethed with righteous anger at the outrage of his craven ingratitude. Not just anger, hatred. I would have my true love and my youth. I prayed to the goddess of night, and she showed me the darkness. In the blackness I met Vampire, who said he would grant me immortality if I forged a pact with death, a pact of blood. My pact was sealed when, on the day of the wedding, I killed Sergei. Tatiana looked me in the eyes, no longer seeing me as an aged man but as a monster. She fled from me, and I cried in anguish. She needed to understand the sacrifice I made for her. I pursued, but before I could reach her, she flung herself from the walls of Ravenloft, and I watched everything I ever wanted fall from my grasp. Since then, I have studied and learned much. My magic is beyond that of mortal men, but the darkness tricked me into having its name, Vampire. I thirst for life and love without rest, cursing my past for making me what I am. I can no longer feel the sun on my face, nor the peace of prayer in my soul. Indeed, the sun and its light are the only things I fear. And the sword, Sergei's damnable sword, I entrusted it to the necromancer Kazan, who destroyed it for me soon after I destroyed its master. Little else can harm me now. What I desire most in all the world is my love, Tatiana. I have hunted for her these many years, and even felt her within my grasp. But she escapes. She taunts me. What will it take to bend her love to me? I will be vigilant. I will be watching, waiting until Tatiana is mine at last.